Buying a mid-sized hatchback used to be a simple exercise. You trawl through a list of cheap cars made by honest, value-for-money manufacturers, pick out your favourite and repeat again in 5 years' time. Then, however, the big names from Germany came along and changed the game for good. BMW, Audi and Mercedes-Benz all realised that there was a genuine demand for small premium cars, and that by getting customers into their products earlier, they could flog the more expensive models further down the line. Speaking of which, here are two of the newest contenders, the BMW 1 Series and Mercedes-Benz A-Class. Both will be vying for your attention, but which is the most worthy? To find out, we've got a Mercedes-Benz A220d AMG line Premium Plus and a BMW 118i M Sport. They're not exactly equivalent, but we have driven most of the range on each car, so we can give you a considered opinion of what they're like overall. We'll be judging them on driving, interior and practicality, with a verdict at the end. Right, BMW first. Now, the cabin of the BMW is very much an evolution over the previous Mark II 1 Series, but it still feels new and contemporary in here. It's also really well built with good quality materials and nicely damped buttons, and that goes across the entire range of 1 Series, so it doesn't matter whether you go for the top spec or the bottom spec, it still feels solid and really nicely executed. That said, I do like the M Sport spec, the sportier spec, because you get this nice leather-lined, chunky steering wheel, the M Sport badging down there, some stitching on the seats, and this really rather intricate illuminated Boston, that's what they're calling it, trim on the doors there, and this on the centre console. And that lights up, you can see it best at night, in whichever colour the ambient lighting is set to, so that's a cool little detail. I'm going to explain the infotainment options that you get on the 1 Series, and bear with me because it can be a bit of a mouthful, but we'll give it a go. As standard, you get BMW Live Cockpit Plus, which runs iDrive 6 and is surfaced on an 8.8-inch infotainment screen. However, this particular car has got the Technology Pack 2, which features the upgraded infotainment system, which is called BMW Live Cockpit Professional, and that's got a 10.25-inch infotainment screen and 10.25-inch digital dashboard display. And crucially, it runs on the upgraded software, which is called BMW Operating System 7.0. The standard infotainment system is very good, but if you go for the professional setup, it's absolutely exceptional. And one of the reasons for that is the control methods that you can choose between. So you've got touchscreen, which is great, especially when you're sitting still like I am now. But when you're on the move, this rotary dial down here with its shortcut buttons and its touchpad, which has also been added on top, it's so much easier to navigate the infotainment system when you've actually got a physical controller. And it's strange because Audi and Mercedes-Benz, they also had this control system, but they've ditched it in recent years, and BMW is one of the only manufacturers that still uses it, and I don't understand why, because it's so good and intuitive that I can't really find any fault with it. The infotainment system itself is packed with functionality, the graphics are really crisp, it's lightning quick, there's never any lag or delay. It really is the benchmark in this class, I'd say. BMW has also added something called Intelligent Personal Assistant to the 1 Series, and we've seen that on pricier BMWs in the past, and essentially it's like Siri but for your car. So I can say, "Hey BMW,
hello, what can I help you with?"
Tune the radio to Absolute Radio.
Absolute Radio.
And there you go, she's tuned into the right radio station. She can also set the sat nav or show you the sport displays on your car or turn the heated seat on. Lots of functionality in there, and it saves you from actually diving into the menu system and doing it yourself. Other clever features that you get on this car, or you can get rather as an optional extra, include BMW Reversing Assistant, which comes with BMW Parking Assistant. And what it means is that say you drive up a narrow driveway into a garage and then you think, oh, in the morning I've got to reverse back down that, and that's going to be a bit tricky. Well, in the 1 Series, you can put it in reverse, and the car has a short-term memory of its last path taken, so it can follow that path backwards and get you out of a tricky situation, and that's very handy indeed.
Connected Package Plus is fitted as standard and includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto functionality, as well as concierge services, real-time traffic information and remote services, such as the vehicle's location and status on your mobile phone. Other standard equipment includes climate control, cruise control, drive modes, LED headlights, an auto-dimming rearview mirror and 16-inch wheels.
The driving position in the 1 Series is actually pretty good. You've got lots of adjustment in the steering wheel especially, more so than in the Mercedes-Benz. It comes out just that bit further. The seats are, on this car at least, electric memory seats, but even if you have the manual seats, which comes as standard, then there's still plenty of adjustment there, no matter how tall or short you might be. Also, M Sport spec, you've got that little bit of additional bolstering, and they keep you in place in the corners really well, but don't feel too pinching on the sides either, so they are a good addition. On the wider subject of the driving position, I just want to talk about the digital dashboard display, because it's the same on all BMWs that have this fitted. And while it's very clear and I can see my speed, I can see the fuel level, there's no complaints about the clarity of the information that's being presented, rival cars such as Audi's virtual cockpit or the Mercedes-Benz system, as we're about to see, they've got far more functionality and customization. Some people won't mind that because it is quite simple after all, but you could be forgiven for thinking that, well, what's really the difference between this and the regular dials or the semi-digital screen which you got on the previous 1 Series? And that's a valid point. Finally, we'll talk about practicality and how much space you've got up here, as well as storage space. And, you know, I'm 5'10", I've got plenty of room. There's no sunroof fitted to this car, there is to that A-Class, so just bear that in mind when we're doing the comparison. But loads of leg room, loads of knee room, doesn't feel claustrophobic at all. And the storage space as well, pretty good, you know, because I've got enough room for a big bottle in there. There's another storage space behind that. Armrest, reasonable amount of space in there. 2 cup holders, place for your phone. That's actually a wireless charger in this car. And the glove box, not a bad size either.
An excellent effort from the 1 Series. Now let's have a look at the A-Class.
Now we're in the A-Class, and unlike the 1 Series, this cabin really is a revolution over the previous gen model, and it's all the better for it. It's so striking once you get in here. You see this 2-tier dashboard design, the big screens, this sort of turbine style chromed air vents, which are really nice as well. The only thing that kind of takes a little bit of the gloss off is the build quality, especially when you compare it with the 1 Series, because in that, as I said, excellent material quality, lovely, feels very well screwed together. This, not so much. These stalks, for example, behind the steering wheel, they're really, really plasticky, and because they're the gear lever stalk and the indicator and the wipers, you use them quite a lot, so that's quite a big touch point that isn't really up to scratch. It's the same with these heater and climate control buttons. Again, they look nice, but they're pretty plasticky. And just some other materials dotted around the cabin aren't really what you'd expect from a car that costs this much money. It's not enough to completely spoil the cabin, I'm not saying that, but I just wish it was a little bit more like the BMW when it comes to quality. It's also quite spec dependent, because these nice 10.25 inch screens, they're not fitted as standard unless you go for the AMG line premium spec or above. If you go any lower, then one or both of the screens will be 7 inches, and it doesn't look as good and it's not as easy to use. That said, you do get an upgraded sound system and 64 colour ambient lighting with the AMG line premium spec and above, so there are a couple of other goodies to tempt you into it. Either way, the main control method for the infotainment system is via touchscreen, which is on the 7-inch and a 10.25-inch versions, or by the touchpad down here and the shortcut buttons that are around it, or you've actually got another system or another method on here, which is the touchpad on the wheel, so you don't need to take your hands off when you're driving. None of them are too difficult to use, especially this touchpad, which actually allows you to fairly intuitively scroll through the menus, but as I said in the 1 Series, that rotary dial really is pretty much as good as it gets for using the system, especially on the move. The infotainment system runs on brand new MBUX software. It was introduced on this A-Class from launch, and it's a massive improvement over the old command system, which was beginning to feel its age. This is far more intuitive. It's got a lot more functionality. It's more customizable as well. You can change the themes of the menu system and choose which functions you want set up first, which is actually quite handy because, as I said, there are so many things that you can do with this. There's also a personal assistant, just like in the BMW, and funnily enough, you activate it by saying, "Hey Mercedes," instead of just saying, "Hey BMW," so there's a couple of similarities there, although you can customize that entry prompt. And if I do it now, "Hey Mercedes,
How may I help you?
turn my heated seat on."
Seat heating is switched on.
Thank you very much. And as you can see, it did it a lot quicker than the BMW system when I asked for a function from that. So in this limited and quite unscientific test, actually the BMW's voice activation isn't quite as slick as the Hey Mercedes software. Then there's the digital dash display. I said that the 1 Series isn't that customizable on the equivalent that it's got in there. In this car, it's the total opposite because I've got so much customization options, and I can control it using this touchpad on the right-hand side of the wheel here. We can change what's in the middle of the screen, going through a number of options there, and then you can change that between navigation, radio, media, trip computer, your phone, and then you can also change the theme and the dials too. So you can have a clock there, you can have your trip computer. It's just endless different combinations that you can choose from, and there'll surely be one that you like, and I think that's quite nice that they've given you that much choice. As for other clever tech, now the A-Class hasn't got a reversing assistant like the 1 Series, but it has got a feature which I quite like, and it's called augmented reality sat-nav. So you'll be driving along, you've got the sat-nav set to your destination, and as you can see, it overlays arrows onto the actual road, which is seen by a camera out at the front of the car, and it shows you exactly where you need to be turning off at a certain junction or a side road or a slip road, and it just removes that little bit of doubt that you might have when you're going through an unfamiliar area.
Standard equipment on the A-Class includes a reversing camera, climate control, keyless ignition, heated seats, active lane keeping assist, drive modes and 16-inch wheels. LED headlights are standard on sport spec cars upwards. Like the 1 Series, a Mercedes Me app is also downloadable and includes live traffic data, available parking information and private car sharing.
Finally, the amount of space you get up front in the A-Class, I reckon it's pretty much on a par with the 1 Series. I don't feel cramped at all. There's lots of room, I've got lots of headroom, got a nice place to put my foot. Adjustability, the steering wheel, I mentioned this in the 1 Series, it doesn't come out quite as far towards your body. And the seats, electric on this car again, like the 1 Series, they don't go quite as low down, but it's still, not like you're sitting in an SUV. You can still go low enough. And the A-pillars are pleasingly thin as well, so there's no real big blind spot when you're pulling up at a slightly awkward roundabout. My only real issue with the comfort in this car, especially from the driver's seat, is that you don't get lumbar support fitted as standard. You don't get it in the 1 Series either, but you can have it in the BMW as a standalone optional extra. In the A-Class though, you've got to pay for the top trim level to get lumbar support, which is obviously bundled in with a number of other optional extras, which you might not want. But that ends up costing you several £1,000s more just to get an option which really should be fitted as standard. Doesn't quite seem fair. As for storage space, it really is on a par with the 1 Series. The only appreciable difference is that you don't get a little storage cubbyhole just underneath the headlight switch on the Mercedes. You do get that with the BMW, but otherwise you've got a similar size door pocket, slightly deeper armrest I'd say, cup holders forwards of the infotainment controls, and on this car a wireless phone charging pad, and the glove box is similar size as well.
It's mighty close in the interior department, but the BMW's easier to use infotainment and better build quality mean it scrapes the point. On to practicality, and both cars are neck and neck, with the BMW's improved packaging over the previous model paying dividends. Knee room is a particular highlight for the 1 Series, although its chunkier central tunnel running along the floor means it's fractionally easier to get 3 people in the back of the A-Class. As for boot space, the 1 Series wins on seats up capacity, 380 litres to 370, but loses out on seats down capacity, 1200 versus 1210. Also bear in mind that much of the BMW space is located in an underfloor compartment. In the A-Class, the seats fold in a 40-20-40 split as standard, something which is an optional extra on the 1 Series. We can't split these cars for practicality, meaning we'll call this round a draw. Before we go on, here are 4 things you need to know before choosing between a BMW 1 Series and Mercedes-Benz A-Class. At the time of filming, the 1 Series is around 30% cheaper on finance on selected models. While both cars achieved a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating, the A-Class scored higher in every category than the 1 Series. Alternatives include the big-selling VW Golf, new from 2020 Audi A3, and aging Lexus CT. And finally, both cars offer a 3-year unlimited mile warranty from new.
We'll start behind the wheel of the BMW, and one of the biggest things of note for this new 1 Series is that it's no longer rear-wheel drive. It's front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, X-drive even. And the reason that's such a big deal is that when the first generation 1 Series was launched all those years ago, BMW made a big fuss about it being the only rear-wheel drive hatchback that you could buy, and that because of that, it was sharper to drive, it was more exciting, it was more fun. Now they've repackaged it so there's more space in the cabin, but the power goes to the front wheels. Has it lost any of its ultimate driving machine-ness? Well, the honest answer is, in most situations, you're not really gonna notice. And BMW knows this. They realised that its customers, for the most part, weren't massively fussed about which wheels were driven, and actually some of them probably didn't really know or didn't understand the significance of having rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. I'm happy to report though that even with the switch to front-wheel drive, this is still quite good fun. Actually, it's more fun than most of its rivals. The steering especially is really sharp and direct, it's positive, there's plenty of grip, and there's tight body control too, so you can still go down a country road and enjoy it. It's just a slightly different way of delivering the enjoyment. But will you notice? Maybe not with this 118i, probably more so with the sportier versions, but you know, it's not that big a difference. As for comfort, this car is M Sport spec with the stiffer M Sport suspension, and it's also got 19-inch alloy wheels. And it wasn't that long ago that that was a recipe for total and utter disaster and surefire backache. But now, you know, it's certainly firm. There's an edge to the ride, as I'm sure you can see with the camera shaking down this slightly bumpy urban road, but it's not that bad at all, actually. It's certainly not unbearable. And for me at least, it wouldn't put me off buying one. You can also get adaptive dampers with the regular 1 Series, which you can't with a regular A-Class. You can on AMG models, but honestly, they're not really worth it. If you want a better ride quality, top tip is to get the smaller wheels or delete that M Sport suspension. As for refinement, well, this 1 Series does have an edge over the A-Class because the suspension, for a start, is a lot quieter. When you go over bumps, it makes nowhere near as much noise. There's a little tickle of wind rush from the mirrors, perhaps at motorway speeds, but nothing too bad. And the biggest difference is the engine. So this is a 118i. Even in an A180 petrol or an A200 petrol Mercedes-Benz A-Class, they're nowhere near as quiet as this. You can almost find yourself forgetting to change gear because the engine is that hushed. You won't hear it on the motorway, you'll barely hear it when you're accelerating. And the A-Class just can't match up to that, because the A180 petrol and the A200, you need to work them quite hard, and that does mean they can sound a bit thrashy. This definitely doesn't have that problem. And actually, this 3-cylinder 1.5 litre 118i model gives you enough performance for everyday driving. If you're frequently doing motorway journeys or you're carrying lots of people around, then you might want one of the diesels, but otherwise this does the job really well indeed. And as I said, it isn't as thrashy as the equivalent petrols in the A-Class, so you don't have to work it as hard to get the performance. The steering is sharp and it's direct, it's positive. I mean, it's also part of the M Sport Plus package, because this is the M Sport steering, which also comes with beefier brakes, but it all adds up to a feeling that BMW hasn't given up on making a car which is fun to drive, even if it's a slightly more grown-up version of fun. Finally, I just want to talk about the 6-speed manual. You can get an automatic version, of course, but premium car manufacturers don't have the best reputation when it comes to making a good manual gearbox. But the manual in this and the manual in the Mercedes, if you opt for it, are actually pretty good. I mean, maybe the clutch is a bit heavy and the gear stick's still a bit rubbery feeling, but you can get on with it. You can get used to it.
BMW driven, let's try the A-Class.
So into the A-Class, unlike the 1 Series, it is in sporty AMG line spec, or AMG line Premium Plus spec to be exact. But what that essentially means is that we've got lowered comfort suspension, so it's not claiming to be as firm as the BMW's M Sport suspension. What's also worth noting is that this model, the A220D, has independent or multi-link rear suspension. A lot of the cheaper A-Classes only have less advanced torsion beam suspension. The reason that's important is because A-Classes with the torsion beam suspension can have a fairly crashy ride quality. This, though, on its 18-inch alloy wheels, which is 1 inch smaller than the 1 Series, has a good ride. It's composed, it goes over bumps nicely, it settles, it's just that bit more polished than what the 1 Series offers. However, it falls down in the comfort stakes with the refinement, because this A220D isn't all that quiet. You can hear it when you accelerate and when you're just clattering around town at normal speeds. Compare it to an equivalent BMW diesel engine and that's a lot quieter. They are really impressively refined in the 1 Series. You've also got in this, as I mentioned, the noisier suspension, so when you do go over a bump you can hear it a lot more. And I think the road noise could also be a little bit louder too. So while the ride quality is superior, in other areas of comfort, the BMW does have the edge on the A-Class. However, the engine in this car I'm quite a big fan of, because it's the A220D and it's got 190 horsepower, which in a car of this size is really quite a lot indeed. So as soon as you pull away from the lights or out of a side turning, you'll get a bit of wheel spin, or actually quite a lot of wheel spin, because the front wheels can't cope with the power. But then once it puts the power down, it really flies off into the distance. It's genuinely quite quick. I'm not 100% sure if it's any quicker than a 120D. We'd probably have to do a drag race to find out. But if you're looking for a bit of performance from your A-Class, you don't fancy going for the A35 version, this is actually a pretty good place to start. I mean, you could argue that's a bit unnecessary, because the A180D and the A200D are both perfectly reasonable engines. But if you're doing lots of motorway miles and you still want good fuel economy and good performance, the 220D is actually a pretty good choice. The gearbox on this A220D is an 8-speed automatic, and I feel like it suits having a more powerful diesel connected to it, because on some of the lower powered versions it can be a bit hesitant sometimes and sort of be a bit indecisive when it's choosing between gears. But in this, I've not had a problem with it so far. And even when you go for the manual override, it's still pretty responsive. As for handling, is it as fun as the 1 Series? In a word, no, it's not. That's sharper, it's more entertaining. But the A-Class doesn't embarrass itself, far from it. The steering is nicely weighted, it's got enough grip, there's not too much body roll. And actually, when we talk about low speed handling, it's got a party trick because the turning circle in this is really incredible. Take a look at this.
Another close run thing, but the 1 Series wins the driving section by delivering a more polished experience out on the road. The BMW 1 Series and Mercedes-Benz A-Class are proof that high-end cars needn't be £50,000 SUVs or supersized saloons. Indeed, a 5-door hatchback can provide much of the premium experience for a fraction of the price. But which one is the winner?
This was a very close twin test with both cars putting in an excellent show for themselves, but in the end, the BMW 1 Series is the winner. It's got a slicker infotainment system, it's got better build quality, and the drive is just that bit more polished as well. Not to mention the fact that at the time of filming, the finance figures on it are better than the Mercs. Do you agree with us though? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the Parker's Cars channel.